going on, Paladins friends? How you doing? Hirez, JuJu here, Matthew Marshall. I'm here with Garrett.
Hey, I'm your substitute Garrett for the day. Name is James Horgan, one of our designers, and I'll be joining Matt here to talk about the game.
Yep. So I don't know if you guys were watching as our pre-roll here, but it says every Thursday now.
Every fourth Thursday. Fourth Thursday
of the month.
Yeah.
This is part of an initiative we're trying to do where we can get more info out for our community.
That's right. Yeah, we want to make sure that you guys are involved in our processes and you know what we're doing. So every fourth Thursday, we're going to come out. Usually Garrett, but occasionally me, maybe Charles, will talk to you guys, and we'll be joined by Matt, and we'll have a good time, talk about what we're doing.
And our big goal for this is to basically look at what we've done, what we're currently doing, and what we plan to do to try and give you guys a better broad picture view of what's going on. So, for instance, today we're going to start off talking about our last patch.
Yeah, so 59 was a fun patch. New champion, Talus, and in general, we're pretty happy with how that patch went. For Talus specifically, we're very happy with the way he is being played, but, spoiler alert, you are going to see some buffs in the patch preview tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. And so, I remember testing Talus a lot internally. He's kind of your baby.
He's my son.
And you had this one build that just annoyed me to no end. You were super fast. I couldn't seem to get your health down quickly. What was that build you were using?
Well, I have three, one for each of the legendaries. I run Raging Demon if we're up against a bunch of tanks, and I want to sort of play like a damage character. I'll run... The one I run on live is actually the... Inner power, I believe, or true power, the one that resets when you go back to your teleporter. Sure. I like that for the heal, a little bit more damage. It's nice and it's versatile. It does a lot. But my favorite is the Faustian Bargain, where you're constantly setting a new recall point and you're moving around the map. It's really good with the move speed boost, and... Now, maybe it is because when playtesting, I sort of know who I'm up against a lot better, where on live, it's could be anyone. Sure. We got, 17 million players. Yeah. But I love using that to outmaneuver and then bamboozle the people unfortunate to go up against me.
Sure. No, it's been interesting to watch in live as people kind of figured out the different strategies that we'd been testing and experimenting with. And I think we saw some of the biggest improvements with the people who figured out to use those teleports close in to sort of almost like blink back in combat, spam.
Yeah, you could be really, really sneaky. One of the interesting things that we saw was... when we were looking at our stats, like the first day after his release, his win rate was actually very low, and we were pretty concerned. And then the next day, it went up, relative to where it was, 20%. Sure. So he clearly does have a learning curve, more than we've seen on other recent champion releases, and we think that's really interesting.
Sure.
Especially with just the way his movement ability works. You really have to remember where you're at and think about how to make it useful. You need to have good placement, but it's a lot of fun and it can be really rewarding.
So, question for you, from a design perspective, generally how much time needs to pass before you feel you can get an accurate representation from the data?
For a patch cycle, it's about a week. And, yeah, it's about a week where we feel we have enough matches that we can be statistically significant across all levels of play.
Sure.
Because we do want to make sure that we're looking at the entire game, silver and up, gold and up, and especially when you're looking at your Masters players. And I'm talking about skill levels, so we can actually look at those high-level players even in casual. But when you're looking at those master players, obviously, since they're a very small section of the player base that's very skilled, we do want to make sure that we have enough matches so that we can actually get good data. Because, if you have only 100 games, which you might have for, Grover after the first day, maybe he's only been played 100 times in Masters level games, then you could have some really weird circumstances in your data. But once you get more, then it becomes very reliable just because of the way statistics work, the law of large numbers, all that stuff.
Sure. So, Dallas, you mentioned he's getting a little bit of a buff. What are the areas you think that we're going to be improving?
So, 2 key areas for him, and tune into the patch preview where we'll talk about this more in depth. But one, he just was not dealing enough damage. Even in games where he is winning, he was dealing less damage than other flanks that were dying the same amount or a little bit less. And then second, we felt that upon the release, one of his cards, I believe it's called Revitalize, it's his heal when he teleports, was just too valuable. So we're going to cut that in half, but take the value we have, add 100 to it, and then just give it to him base.
Cool.
So you will always heal when you teleport, and if you take that card, you're going to actually get more out of it.
That's good, because I think watching a lot of the streamers, you would see there's a lot of almost downtime for people who understood him. They'd just teleport back, and if they couldn't go in and get that kill right away, they'd kind of just sit there for a minute to let the regen.
To an extent, is a little bit important. You don't want a flank that is just always going. That becomes very overwhelming to play against. It could be really frustrating.
Sure.
But you also don't want to just be waiting around corners your entire game. So splitting the difference, a little bit more survivability. It should be fun. We'll see who's going. Another, once again, bit of a balanced spoiler, Torvald will be getting nerfs, and we'll be talking about those in more depth tomorrow. One of the ones that I felt very strongly about is his Silence Beam will be reduced by Resilience.
Okay.
It was one of the only non-ultimate crowd controls with a duration that was not reduced. So that'll be changed. Along with some other stuff, he has actually been very strong after his re-release with the new kit, and from what I've heard from you, people seem to be liking it.
Yeah, it was really interesting from a community perspective, and also myself. I'm a huge Torvald fan. He's probably one of my favorite front lines, probably characters, period. And so
he really reminds me of you.
There's that resemblance. What can I say? But no, when I heard we were changing him, I myself was a little anxious about that. But having really played it and tried it, it does still feel like Torvald because of the way we've shifted the abilities around. And I think that this change has made him more versatile and able to kind of do more than just hard counter front lines.
Yeah, he is now probably the most versatile frontline, which I think is a really cool role, and it sort of fits him. Just the way he's presented, he looks a little different from other front lines.
Sure.
He now plays a little different from other front lines, and I think it's to his benefit. I think there's a lot of situations where Torvald can do something that someone else just can't.
Sure. My biggest thing was, in the past, he was, I felt that certain maps, certain comps, he really shined, but he kind of was struggling in some of the other ones, and I think this really opens him up so that regardless of what your team comp is or who you're facing, there's generally situations where he's going to be a valuable asset.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's not just waiting around the corner near a ledge to knock you all off anymore. He's got a lot of options for where he can stand, where he can be effective. So overall, we're really pleased, once again, with the way he's been played. He's just too strong at every level of play.
So basically, you feel that you've met the goals you had with this redesign, and perhaps just a little too much in some areas.
He's just winning all the time.
Yeah. All he does is win.
He's super good, and that's awesome. We want really strong characters, but need to make sure that they're not going to a little too far. And Torvald right now, he's super good. I mean, you should practically never not pick him.
Yeah, no, it is funny because, for the longest time in ranked, it's been Bandrogos, Willow, Bandrogos,
sure.
and now you're seeing Torvald sneaking up in there.
Yep.
So as far as other changes we did with the 59, sorry, the overtime thing, that was something that's been a little controversy. So a little while back, incomplete version of it made it out. We got some feedback off that, and it wasn't finished at the time. So after finishing it and releasing it, what was the process as to why we wanted to try that and kind of?
So the initial idea was sometimes the conclusion of an Onslaught match felt a little just quick. Like it was just, okay, it's over. That's it.
Sure.
It's done. And so we wanted to try overtime, see if it would maybe make things feel a little better, feel a little closer. But in actually playing it, seeing live games, we've come to the conclusion that really it's taking what is a valuable 10-minute game mode and having it drag on in weird and kind of unpleasant ways.
Sure.
So we're just gonna remove it. Onslaught will go back to its original state, no overtime. So you hit 400 points, you have more points at 10 minutes, you win the game. That's it.
Cool. And I understand, though. You wanted to try it out, see how it was, and just the reception, the overall, way that it worked out.
It just wasn't the right thing for the mode at this time. Maybe in the future we find a really good way to do it that everyone agrees will make the game mode better. Maybe we'd ship that, see what the community thinks. But right now, it wasn't right. It wasn't helping the mode. So we're going to remove it, and you'll have Onslaught back the way it was.
Ah, cool. That's one thing I always like about Hirez here is that we're always, whether it seems like a great idea or a so-so idea, there's this attitude of just, hey, let's try it. Let's see what people think.
And part of that is because you never really know, right? Like, no matter how much playtesting we do with whatever range of people we have, maybe we have, RX pros like Rude or Nick. Dude, Nick is ridiculous. Pretty hair is.
Believe me,
he's a terror. Or we get people who really don't play the game that much, right? It doesn't matter who we have playtesting, we just cannot get as many games, as much variety in our games and in playstyles as in live. It's not possible. So when we try something, when we try anything, when we introduce anything to the game, there's always an element of when it goes live, something unexpected can happen.
Absolutely.
And often does. Recently, they've generally been good unexpected things, but occasionally it doesn't work out, and then we fix it.
Absolutely.
So, boom. No Onslaught overtime.
Cool, man. Good. So one of the things I wanted to talk about that's been a bit of a hot topic and something I'm working on writing up is how our matchmaking works. Yeah, I've seen a lot of different, I get tweeted the matches. So, hey, can you explain this one? What happened here? And, it's tough to kind of go on a case-by-case basis and try and explain it. But I think giving a broad overview will kind of help people be able to reference that and explain it for themselves, basically. And as far as our matchmaking goes, there's a couple different things I wanted to talk about, and you know about this stuff. So as far as the actual matchmaking, what are the variables that come into play there?
Sure. So the way matchmaking matches you is based on something called an MMR, matchmaker rating. And that is a behind-the-scenes value that is basically where the matchmaker thinks you belong relative to other players.
And then the variance,
right?
That's its confidence in that assessment.
Exactly. So it takes those numbers and looks at who's online and basically tries to create a game where you have similarly MMR players with not too much of a gap that go up against each other. And then based on the variance, it'll learn from those games, right? So when the matchmaker is right about you, that variance is going to go down, and it's going to say, I am correct in where I think this player is.
Okay.
And when the matchmaker is wrong, or you defy expectations, maybe you have a really good game, then the matchmaker is going to widen that variance and say, okay, let's start changing those numbers. Let's start reassessing where this player belongs.
Okay.
So that's all very important, just making sure that the matchmaker has a consistent idea of where each individual player is. And then it also has to go through and it has to account for things like parties. If you're playing duo queue, maybe both of us play together and I'm in like silver and you're in platinum, so you're carrying me, right? Well, since we're playing together and we're friends, we know each other, maybe we're on voice communication, we're going to play better. And so as a result, the matchmaker looks at that, it tries to put us against other partied players, or it basically gives us just a little boost.
Sure.
Because it's like, all right, you're better when you're working with other people, so we're going to consider you to be better players under those circumstances.
Sure.
This gets much stronger as you have larger parties. A full 5-man is just intrinsically more effective than a 4-man with a 5th player, regardless of, how similar those skill levels are, because everyone is coordinating. And, so it's important to look at those factors and to make sure that parties are being accounted for. And then we're also constantly going through our stats and looking at the way we're handling these things. Just recently, me and Garrett were looking through how whether or not you're in duo queue affects your win rate in ranked at various levels of play.
Okay.
And so we're just making sure that we're keeping an eye on these things, especially in ranked, but also in casual queue as well. As one of the things is you do want to party with 4 of your friends, and you do want to get good matches.
Sure. Now, ranked and casual, entirely separate. No statistics influence.
Yeah, that's very important. When you are first placing into rank, part of the reason we have placement games, 1 is to figure out where you belong in terms of division. 2 is to figure out where you belong in the matchmaker. And over the course of those 15 games, your variance is very high, and we're just making sure that we can get a good idea of where to put you. And so that's why in some cases, I was talking to some of the pro players a week or 2 ago, and they're like, hey, why are these people being placed into Diamond? Well, in order to do that, you have to be very good at the game. You have to be playing really strong matches in your placements, and if you're placed into Diamond, man, you're probably going to be in Masters real quick. Like, you're a really, really strong player.
So now you talk about doing really well through those, and one of the things that I think I see a lot of confusion on is how the matchmaker determines how good you're doing. So it's mainly win-loss.
It is entirely win-loss, and who you played against, but that's part of what win-loss is. It does not account for your stats in the match, or if you got a lot of kills or such.
For good reason, though.
Yeah, exactly. It might seem like a really good idea, but it's really easy to get people who aren't playing to win. So there's always this thing in every shooter where you've got a sniper, they're sitting in the back, they're not doing anything. And in our game, because it is a team-based game. Your sniper still needs to contribute to the objective and to the goals. So making sure that the snipers that are doing more to help their team win, as opposed to just getting a ton of kills, are rewarded for it appropriately. And, I mean, make no mistake, playing better, healing more, shielding more, getting more kills is going to make your team win more.
Correct.
So in the end, whether or not you win the game, that is the ultimate result of how good you performed in that match, as opposed to how well your opponents performed. And occasionally it does feel bad. Occasionally you'll have games where you're playing really well, but maybe Matt's in your game and he's playing Inara and he's never played her before.
Sure.
Which don't play people for the first time in ranked.
And that's something I kind of wanted to touch on too,
Yeah.
is this idea that, like, I think there's a lot of people who maybe have like one character that's their baby, they're awesome at that, and so maybe they get lucky and they get that character throughout their placements and they get a higher rating. But people like that who aren't as well rounded likely won't be making it to the top, because this is a team game where you need to fill the role that your team needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are going to be a lot of situations where you have a particularly unique player who maybe plays Bomb King, and then he goes all the way up, except in Diamond. There's maybe this week one of the pros has been playing a lot of Bomb King, so he's banned every game.
Sure.
Well, now this player is going to have to play someone else. There are always going to be situations like that, but in general, whether you win or whether you lose is just the most basic way to determine whether or not you're doing well, because you can deal a lot of damage but still not be playing your character to the best. Especially, hey man, everyone has encountered those Ceres players that just don't heal, right?
Yep.
Like, even if they're putting out 100k damage, 150k, I don't know how, but let's say they are, they're still probably not doing as much as they could, and as a result, they're probably not going to win as much.
True. The other thing I kind of wanted to talk about as far as the way the matchmaker works, let's say you're a high rank and you see someone with a lower ranked border. What kind of scenarios could create that situation to explain why me, a diamond, has a silver in my game?
Well, part of that is like, as a diamond player, it isn't that strange to have, let's say, maybe you're playing at night, there aren't as many people queuing up right now, so the matchmaker has to do a little bit more work, you're in queue for a little longer, which that's just the reality of how matchmaking works. When there's less people, it's harder to make ideal games. So maybe you as a diamond player are pulled into a platinum game, right? Where you're the top on your team, and it's you, 3 other platinum players, and a gold player. That's not that bad, right? The other team is probably in a similar situation. And maybe some of those platinum players are very good for platinum. Maybe the gold player is about to get promoted. Well, the same situation could be said for that silver player, right?
Sure.
If you have a silver player that just got placed, maybe they're having a rocky time,
high
and
variance,
then they realize that Inara was the perfect champion for them, right? And now they're just winning nonstop. And they're playing a tank, they're holding the point, and they're climbing, they're doing really well. Well, maybe they haven't promoted yet. Maybe when they do promote, they're going to be going directly to the top of gold.
Sure.
Because one of the things that our system does is when it promotes you, it says, hey, where is your MMR? Where should you be? And if you're in gold 3 and your MMR is not gold 2, it's like diamond 5, well, it's going to skip you forward because you don't belong in gold 2. And you don't belong in gold 3 anymore, but you're going to promote out of it because you're playing very well.
Sure.
So there are situations where a player with a silver border is not accurately representative of their skill level, because you have to remember that's where they currently are. It's not necessarily where they should be, but that won't change until they get that promotion.
Sure. So between TP, the way that the hidden MMR works, the variants, there's a lot of different variables that could explain a lot of these, and sometimes it just boils down to prime time and region.
Yeah, that's part of it. If there are not as many people online, because I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning and decided to play a ranked game, there aren't going to be as many NA players up at 5 a.m. Not on the East Coast.
Sure.
That's just that's the way our society is. So matchmaking is going to take a little bit longer, and it's going to have to find me the NA players that are up at 5 a.m. Luckily, we've got a very competitive player base and a very large player base, so there are still matches that are happening, and they're still of pretty good quality, but occasionally I'm going to get a match where it takes a little bit longer, and maybe the matchmaker is going to have to try a little bit harder to balance out those teams. That is expected. It's not ideal, but
sure. Now, so that's one of the benefits of opening up this ranked mode to more people is that it creates this stream of people who can feed those different skill levels, so that you don't have these games where it puts you in a less than ideal matchup.
Right.
Now,
and we're actually very pleased to see how many of our players are really embracing ranked.
Yeah.
As Evan would say, it's the LeBron's lifestyle, but at all levels of play. And that's awesome. They're climbing up. And they are getting better. So there are a lot of players coming in. They're being placed into the roughly appropriate place. And having more players come in, it's only a good thing. Because if a player is getting into your Masters games after 25 games total, including placements, it's because they're really good and they deserve to be there, right?
Sure.
Like, that's essentially the only explanation, unless, once again, you're queuing at a really weird time, there aren't that many players, then potentially you could get a wider range in your match, but it still should be roughly balanced. And it's important to mention that also the matchmaker is constantly tracking how it expects that match to play out. So if you are in a game that you're favored to lose and you do lose that game, it's going to be you're going to lose less TP,
sure,
right? If you're in a game that you're favored to lose but you win, you're going to get greater rewards out of the game.
So it compensates to kind of course correct.
That exactly, yeah. It basically, it's trying to help you climb, right? If you're doing really well, then you're going to go up because you're defying expectations, you're getting wins when the system thinks you shouldn't. And, on the other hand, if you're losing games when the system thinks you should be winning, then it's going to say, okay, maybe you actually don't belong here. Sure. I'm going to start pulling you down. And that's very important because that allows the system to constantly be gauging itself.
Good, man. I'm glad we're able to talk about that. We're coming up on that time where we're going to have to wrap up. But
yeah, Matt, he turns into a pumpkin at about 1:35.
A pumpkin?
Not yet, but soon.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, keep an eye out. I'm going to try and get that ranked explainer published today and answer some follow-up questions on it if anyone has any.
Yeah, tweet at him. He loves it. It's his job, and he loves it.
Yes, send me your tweets.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up for today, and next month we likely will have to move the date for this show
November.
November, yes, November. Yeah. We're going to have to move the date. So next month we'll be on track. November, probably move the date. But this is something we're going to be doing monthly from here on out.
We're very thankful that all of you are playing our game, but we probably won't do this on Thanksgiving. Just... for obvious reasons.
Yes, I need to eat.
yeah, he does. He's very... Look at him.
I know, wasting away here.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Hirez JuJu, the one and only.
I'm James. I'll see you next time on The Realm.
Yes, sir. Thanks, everybody. See you out in the realm.